This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon. I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker today, John Tatman. John has been a member of the ANS for nearly the past 20 years, and one of his interests is the coinage of Kyrene. He's also president of the San Francisco Ancient Numismatic Society. His article, Cretan Overstrikes, Gortina, Filisarna, and Polarinia, Drams, Overstruck, and Kyrenaica Coins, appeared in the 2023 American Journal of Numismatics, and he has another article being released into AJN next year, which he'll be discussing some today. So thank you, John, for being here, and with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Ryan. I'd also like to thank the ANS for allowing me to do a long table discussion on the work I've been doing on the early gold coins of Kyrene. Get the slideshow going. There are over 30 types and almost 300 dye varieties of gold coins struck at Kyrene. Today I'll focus on the earliest gold coins that weigh either approximately 3.4 or 1.7 grams and have a silphium plant on one side and the head of Zeus Ammon on the other. These coin types were struck from the late 5th century BC until around the mid 4th century BC. Recent information has helped clarify the chronology of these uncommon gold coins. Before we get started, here are definitions for some of the terms I'll use today. It's not certain what the people of Kyrene called these gold coins, but the denominations may have been drams and hemidrams based on their local system of 5 drams to the Attic tetradrachm. In his book on gold coins of Kyrenaica, Lucien Neville called the coins weighing about 3.4 grams a tetralitra, since it's 4/10 of the weight of an Attic gold stater. Since this name is the most specific for weights of these coins, and it's started to become used more often recently, I'll use these multiples of the litra for the denominations. So a dilitron is 1.7 grams, and the litra, which is not the same type, but some are associated, is about 0.86 grams. In 1860, Ludwig Müller introduced the term Asiatic dram to describe the silver coins of about 3.4 grams from Kyrenaica, since they weighed about the same as the 3.5 gram Elysian weight drams struck by the Greek cities of the Ionian coast. Since the phrase Asiatic is still commonly used for these drams and their fractions, I'll continue to use it for the silver denominations. They're 80% of the Attic weight denominations. In BMC Cyrenaica, Stanley Robinson described 3 types of silphium plant images on coins of Kyrenaica. On the right side is a drawing of a type 1C silphium plant like these coins have. So type 1 coins have alternating leaves, and subtype C has upper axillary umbels, which you can see pointed with the lower arrows on to the right of the silphium plant. But there are no terminal umbel leaves around the terminal umbel, which is at the top. The traditional opinion has been that personal names on the coins of Kyrene were government or mint officials. In 1975, Sandro Stucci proposed the names on the coinage of Kyrenaica were prominent citizens who made donations either with the bullion or to pay for the bullion used for striking the coins. Daniele Puccini expanded on this theory about a decade ago. For over a century, the 2 tetralitra and 2 dilitra shown here have been the only 4 types known of this series. All the specimens shown here are in museum collections. All 4 coins have the type 1C silphium plant. While similar in design, each has a unique style that we will discuss in more detail. Over the past few years, These three unrecorded types have been in auctions. Again, all three have type 1C silphium plants, but each of the three heads are of different style. The rest of my presentation, I will discuss the chronologic order that proposed for this series of coins. Herodotus and other ancient sources provide details about the Batid dynasty until the time of Archelaus IV, the last Batid king. Alexander the Great's alliance with Kyrene in 331 BC and the time after is well documented by Diodorus Siculus, Pausanias, and other ancient sources. According to Robison, these coins were struck between these two events. However, the history of the city during the century in between is vague. Hard data is also lacking. So the chronologic order has to be determined by comparisons of gold coin styles with contemporary silver coins as they're arranged in B&C Cyrenaica. Style comparisons can be subjective, and determination of dates is often difficult without other evidence. So we will examine any other numismatic findings that may be helpful. This timeline summarizes what little is known about the century between the end of the monarchy and the alliance with Alexander the Great. Apparently, the cities of Cyrenaica became separate republics, but also formed alliances with other cities in the late 5th century BC. In 401 BC, a democratic rebellion was led by Ariston, and many aristocrats were killed. The surviving aristocrats who fled soon returned with 3,000 Messenian mercenaries. After a bloody battle, when many of the mercenaries were killed, the two sides reached a compromise to form a new republic government. Sallust wrote about a protracted border war between Kyrene and Carthage with significant losses on both sides. In 1987, André Laurent placed the war approximately between 360 and 340 BC, but the dates are still considered controversial. Carthage was often at war with Syracuse during the 4th century BC. If the war between Kyrene and Carthage is in the middle part of the century, Carthage would have been at war on two fronts. If it had been started before a war with Syracuse that ended in 367 BC, or not ended by 345 BC when another war with Syracuse was started. In his description of the silphium types, Robison did not include the differences in the bottom of the silphium plant. Here are different ends at the bottom for type 1C silphium, which were used from about 470 to 340 BC. The image on the left shows a silphium plant with a simple edge. So the bottom is straight or sometimes with a slight concave or convex curve. A few decades later, roots started appearing at the bottom of the coin. So the top image shows a silver coin, and oftentimes they have small shoots coming out from the whole root. One of the tetralitra we'll discuss today is at the bottom, and you can see a root bent to the left at the bottom. The linear base was introduced about 400 to 340 BC. The linear base is a straight or a curved line extending past the stem, so it probably represents a ground line. Here are head positions and hairstyles used for the head of Zeus Ammon from about 475 to 330 BC. On the left is the head of Zeus Ammon facing right with braided hair introduced under the Batids and continued into the last quarter of the 5th century BC. This hairstyle was replaced about that time with a head of Zeus Ammon that had shaggy curls of hair, and the head faced either to the left or right. From about 400 to 350 BC, The head of Zeus Ammon had a long hair curls. And on the right side, facing heads were introduced about 390 to 380 BC until about 350 BC, which had curly hair. Well, there are more features to consider when evaluating the style of the heads. The appearance of the hair serves as a rough indicator for dating coins during this period. Of course, I'm really looking for silver coins with heads that have a strong resemblance to those on the gold, with the assumption that they are struck around the same time. Here's a quick summary for the silver coinage of Kyrene in the second half of the 5th century BC. Around 470 to 460 BC, either late in the reign of Battus IV or early in the reign of Arcesilaus IV, coin designs became very uniform. Usually had a type 1C silphium plant on the obverse and the head of Zeus Ammon to the right with braided hair on the reverse. The tetradrams and didrams are Attic weight, but the dram and smaller fraction were Asiatic denominations. Compared to the previous coins of Kyrenaica, the plans are larger and round. There's usually a city ethnic on the reverse. The same designs were used at Barcae and Hesperides as were used at Kyrene. This type ended with the assassination of Arcesilaus IV about 440 BC. After the end of the monarchy, some cities must have formed alliances with other cities. The first tetradrams struck after the monarchy are these so-called alliance coins because they have one city ethnic on the obverse and was probably the dominant city ethnic on the reverse. Otherwise, the coins have similar designs as the earlier batted coins, but with slight changes in style. With the coin on the left, the letters for the ethnic of Hesperides are around the silphium plant on the obverse. On the reverse, you can see the ethnic for Kyrene in front of Zeus Ammon's face. The unusual tetradrama on the right shows what must have been an alliance between Barcae and Kyrene. Because the ethnic for Kyrene is at the bottom of the obverse, and the ethnic for Barcae is on the reverse. Barcae at some point, even though it's a smaller city, must have become dominant over Kyrene, at least temporarily. These are the last Attic weight tetradrams before the introduction of subsequent Asiatic tetradrams at Kyrene. These are referred to as Republic tetradrams because of the ethnics Barcaeon or Kyrenaeon, which roughly translate to of the Barcaeans or of the Kyrenaeans. In other words, coins of the citizens of the city. On the left is a Barcae tetradrama. The type 2 silphium plant introduced on the reverse, but the head of Zeus Ammon of the reverse keeps the same hairstyle as the earlier coins. Type 2 silphium plants have 2 parallel leaves with a third leaf facing in the center, as can be seen on the obverse of this coin. The Barcae tetradrama in the middle also has a type 2 silphium plant. Now a shaggy hairstyle for Zeus Ammon is introduced. It's previously thought these Republic tetradrams were only struck at Barcae until the coin from Kyrene on the right came on the market a few decades ago. It still has a type 1C silphium plant on the obverse, an old style of head of Zeus Ammon, so the change in hairstyle and introduction of type 2 silphium plants are not used until later when Asiatic tetradrams are struck. The first gold coin struck at Kyrene is this unique anepigraphic tetralitra in the B&F collection. It weighs 3.42 grams. The obverse has a rather crude type 1C silphium plant with a narrow stalk, simple axillary umbels, and small leaflets. At the bottom, there's a root turned to the left. On the reverse, head of Zeus Ammon is squarish with flattening of the top of the head. The face has a shortened forehead, prominent chin, and full beard. The neck truncation has a frontal extension. So we compare it with the Republic tetradrachm stuck at Kyrene. You can see that the head of Zeus Ammon on the tetralitra has a strong resemblance to the head on the reverse of the silver coin. Robinson commented that the head of this Asiatic dram in the Berlin Munz cabinet almost looked the same as the head on the reverse of the tetralitron. Neville noticed that the reverse die for the Asiatic dram had been recut to create a round incus and then used to strike the gold coin. When I first looked at it, I wasn't certain the coins were from the same die. However, when I created semi-transparent overlays that I use for die comparisons, beaded circles an exact match on the coins as is the head of Zeus Ammon. But the head has been recut on the front of the neck truncation and also at the brow of the head above the eye. The silver coin on the right side, where the arrow is, shows the letter kappa. Part of the ethnic for Kyrene is partially off the flange. On the tetralitron, the arrow shows that the part of the lower leg of the letter kappa can still be seen at 10 o'clock near the edge after the die was recut to form a round incus. It's pretty clear that these coins are struck from the same reverse die. This Asiatic dram's overstruck on another Asiatic dram of Kyrenaica. This slide shows the coin reverse rotated to the orientation of the undertype obverse, where you can see the upper part of the undertype coin's type 1C silphium plant. So at the top is a residual terminal umbel, and you can see the two left axillary umbels at the top and bottom, and then upper left leaf in between. When the obverse is rotated, you can see the remains of a beaded neck truncation and part of the beaded circle border. It also appears there might be part of a letter on the right side. Robinson thought the undertype was an earlier coin of Kyrene with a beaded neck truncation, but I could not find any obverses that matched the relationship of the left axillary umbels and the left upper leaf of the residual type 1C silphium plant. The best match I can find is a Barke Techera Alliance Asiatic dram shown at the top from a recent auction. It has an obverse similar to the obverse of BMC 51, which is at the bottom. The black ovals show the area of residual undertype on the overstruck coin and the corresponding areas on the possible undertype coins. However, the neck truncation does not match, but the reverse of BMC 51 looks like it matches. I can't tell if the neck truncation is beaded on either this specimen or the one in the BNF because there's a die break between the border and the neck truncation that obscures it. BMC 13, another Barke Techera Alliance Asiatic dram, shown on the right side, does have a beaded neck truncation, so it's certainly possible. I just can't be certain without an exact match for both sides. However, if the undertype is an Alliance Asiatic dram, then the overstrike would be from around the time of the Republic tetradrams, and then later recut to strike the tetralitron. Here are the first two dilitra of the series. The British Museum specimen on the left is unique and weighs 1.7 grams. It has a silphium plant on the obverse that's of better style with more prominent leaflets. The bottom's off the flange, so it's not possible to tell if a root or linear base is present. The head's a crude style, more triangular with a flat top. The hair short and shaggy. The face has a prominent brow, cheek, and nose. The horn is a crude and kind of a large and thick. The chin is recessed with a triangular beard. The neck's angled back with a straight truncation. The dilitron on the right from an auction weighs 1.72 grams. It's a mule that used the obverse die of the previous tetralitron and the reverse die of the dilitron on the left. The die lengths of the previous three gold coins are shown connected by the black lines. The style progression of the obverse and reverse dies and the presence of minor die breaks indicate that the coins were struck in this sequence. Or it's also possible, with only one known example of each type, die breaks could have occurred while two were being struck simultaneously. Both Robison and Neville thought the reverse of the British Museum dilitron was similar to this Asiatic tetradrachm with the personal name Nicus shown here. Well, I see some similarity. The head of Zeus Ammon on the silver coins of better style. The head is square with straighter hair. It has a fuller beard and thicker neck. I think the dilitra reverses look more like these earliest Asiatic tetradrachms of Kyrene that replace the Attic tetradrachms. Type 2 silphium plants in the legend Kyrene are introduced on the obverses, but personal names have not been added yet. The head of Zeus Ammon on the reverses are of different style with shaggy, sometimes curled hair. There is some similarity of the shape of the head of the tetralitron with this, but most like the point in the center, which is BMC 73. There's still not a close resemblance. The coin with the head of Zeus Ammon that looks the most like the one on this dilitra is an unrecorded and epigraphic gold litra from a recent auction. If the head on the reverse of the litra had a flatter top, it'd be almost identical because the rest of the head, including the face, the horn, beard, and neck, look the same. This litra may be the first struck at Kyrene. The first gold coin, the tetralitron, is considered an emergency issue, probably for mercenary payment. In BMC Cyrenaica, Robison dated the tetralitron between 450 and 435 BC after the assassination of Archelaus IV, and Neville dated the coin around the time of the assassination. Later, in his review of Neville's book in the 1953 Numismatic Chronicle, Robison wrote that this tetralitron was probably struck closer to 425 BC based on its style, in part because by this time, Archelaus IV was thought to have been assassinated around 440 BC instead of a decade earlier. In 2016, Giovanni Gorini wrote an article on the emergency coinage of Kyrene from around this time. He associated this first gold coin with Ariston's rebellion in 401 BC. Based on the overstrike, the recut die, the crudeness of some of the dies and the die links, it can be assumed that all three coins were struck towards the end of the 5th century BC and perhaps as late as Ariston's rebellion. There are 4 known specimens of this next type of dilitron. The coin shown here is from the British Museum collection and weighs 1.7 grams. The silphium plant is attractive with a large larger terminal umbel, short leaves with very prominent leaflets, and a slightly curved linear base. On the reverse, the head profile is more triangular with long curls of hair. The nose is in line with the forehead and the horn is smaller. The beard is triangular in curl, while the neck truncation has small front and rear extensions. In Historia Nemorum, Barclay had attributed this coin to Barclay because of the similarity with the Asiatic tetragram reverses of Barclay, two of which are shown on the right. Robison acknowledged the similarity, but pointed out it was also similar to contemporary Asiatic tetradrams of Kyrene, with the two shown on the left. When I look at all these reverses, I think it looks the most like the head of BMC 74 at the lower left because of the head shape and facial features, even though the hair is not quite as curly. Anepigraphic coins of this period are usually attributed to Kyrene. Neville pointed out the resemblance of the dilitron silphium plant with the one on the obverse of an anepigraphic Asiatic dram attributed to Kyrene is shown at the right. The gold coin also looks similar to this anepigraphic Asiatic hemidram on the left from a recent auction. I think the head of Zeus Ammon looks the most like the one on the reverse of this anepigraphic gold litra below, which is BMC 64. Overall, it seems most likely that this type was actually struck at Kyrene. In his article on the emergency issues of Kyrene, Kyrene also discussed some silver-plated Asiatic tetradrams, two of which are shown at the top. He thought they were struck at the mint during Ariston's rebellion because of economic distress instead of being forgeries. While they're not from the same dies, they are similar to the corresponding full silver tetradrams shown below. So the one on the left is a BMC 73D, the one on the right is a BMC 73G. Both are in the BNF collection. Based on the arrangement in BMC Cyrenaica, these coins that had the head of Zeus Ammon, the long curled hair, would have been the last before personal names were added. Robison dated this dilitra to before circa 390 BC, which is when he thought was just before the silphium plant was moved to the reverse. Neville also used the same date. If this dilitron and the similar Asiatic tetradrams are related to Ariston's rebellion, they would have been struck near the end of the 5th century BC. Well, the revolt was violent. It seems it didn't last more than a few years, with a quick reconciliation of the opposing sides after a major battle. So if these silver-plated tetradrams are associated with Ariston's revolt, then all 4 gold coins would have been from about the same time, despite the different styles. There's another possibility. Perhaps the first 3 coins were struck related to another unknown event earlier in the late 5th century BC. According to Kyrene, all the Asiatic tetradrams with only the city ethnic were struck by the time of the rebellion. The revolt would have caused enough economic turmoil to create a need for silver-plated tetradrams and the 4th gold coin. Another possibility is the long and costly war between Kyrene and Carthage in the first half of the 4th century BC. So the first 3 gold coins would have been struck related to Ariston's rebellion in the late 5th century BC. Most, if not all, of the Asiatic tetradrams with only the city ethnic would have been struck after the rebellion. This prolonged war with Carthage would have resulted in the need for plated tetradrams and the gold dilitron because of the extended duration and cost of the war. The rest of the gold coins in the series are tetralitra with the head of Zeus Ammon moved to the obverse, type 1C silphium plant on the reverse. This unique coin from the Gotha collection is full weight at 3.44 grams. The head of Zeus Ammon is squarish and flat on top. The hair and beard are shaggy while the nose is in line with the forehead. The neck is thicker with a convex truncation. This is the only coin in the series with a city ethnic. The letters of the ethnic Kyrene are on the sides of the silphium plant on the reverse. This tetralitron obverse closely resembles the Asiatic tetradrachm obverse on the left, which has the personal name Aristomedes. The reverse of the gold coin also looks like another Asiatic tetradrachm reverse with the name Aristomedes, which is shown on the right. It has the same style silphium plant surrounded by the letters for the Kyrene ethnic. It may have been struck around the same time as these tetradrachms with the name Aristomedes. Robinson dated this tetralitron to after 390 BC when the silphium plant had been moved to the reverse, and Neville used the same date. If the last tetralitron in Asiatic tetradrachms, BMC 73 to 74, were struck during the second quarter of the 4th century BC, this tetralitron and the Asiatic tetradrachms with personal names, silphium plant moved to the reverse, would have been struck a little later, closer to the mid-4th century BC. This 3.44 gram tetralitron has an attractive facing head on the obverse. The face is somewhat triangular with curled hair and beard. There are small horn tips that you can see on each side beside the cheeks. Type 1C silphium plant with a linear base is on the reverse. What remains of the lettering around the silphium plant was interpreted in the auction catalog as the city ethnic. I think it may be the personal name Kytus. The enlarged view of the reverse on the left shows what appears to be the traces of the letter kappa beside the upper left leaf. The other enlarged image shows the bottom of the coin. The letter delta is on the left side. The letter iota is below the silphium plant. And if you look just to the right of the iota, there appears to be traces of the letter omicron. And then a sigma is on the right side. So the letters that spell out the name Kytus, who also made donations for silver coins around this time. There are examples of other gold coins that have personal names spread around the reverse. These two Attic gold drams are in the British Museum, probably struck a few decades after the tetralitron. The coin on the left has the letters of the name Jason spread around the reverse, similar to what we saw on the tetralitron. The coin on the right has the name Kytus spread around the reverse like the tetralitron. So he must have made donations a second time, or perhaps there was another Kytus who made donations a few decades later. I think this this Asiatic tetradrachm from the Karlsruhe collection is one of the most attractive coins of Kyrenaica. The obverse has a gazelle grazing on the silphium plant, and an artistic facing head of Zeus Ammon is on the reverse. Well, this facing head has a diadem. It is otherwise similar to the one on the obverse of the tetralitron. This anepigraphic 3.4 gram tetralitron may be the last coin in the series. The head of Zeus Ammon on the obverse is a nice style, has a more triangular head profile with shaggy curled hair and beard. The nose is in line with the longer forehead. The horn is smaller and the cheeks are prominent. On the reverse, there's a large die break covering the middle of the silphium plant, but it can still be identified as type 1C. The bottom of the silphium plant is just off the flange, so it's not possible to tell if a root or linear base is present. The head on the tetralitron closely resembles the head on this Asiatic tetradrachm from the Hunterian. The tetradrachm has the name Aristus, who is the first individual, also have their name on a gold litra. The head of Zeus Ammon on this anepigraphic Asiatic hemidrachm in the British Museum is kind of worn, but it also looks like the head on the tetralitron. This table shows the names of individuals on coins of Kyrene during most of the 4th century BC, based on the chronological order and BMC Cyrenaica. The first column lists capital letters for gold coin types, with litra on the left side and Attic gold staters and lower Attic gold denominations on the right. The second column for silver coins shows lowercase letters for Asiatic tetradrachms and lower Asiatic denominations on the left, with Attic denominations on the right. So you can see there's some consistency with the names and what coins were being struck with the names of these individuals. You can also see the first several people do not have associated gold coins. Gold litrae with personal names start with Aristus, and Attic gold staters start after 330 BC with the name Cheriphon. So the last 3 tetralitra were probably struck after the addition of personal names and before the introduction of Attic gold staters. This slide has the italic capital letter T added to represent coins with the name Kytus, and the other 2 added to the table near similar Asiatic tetradrachms. The initial 3 die-linked gold coins probably were emergency issues related to Ariston's rebellion at the end of the 5th century. The last gold dilitron was contemporary with the last of the Asiatic tetradrachms without personal names. It most likely was struck at Kyrene during the 2nd quarter of the 4th century BC, before the silphium plant was moved to the reverse and the head of Zeus Ammon placed on the obverse. It may be associated with a long war between Kyrene and Carthage if it did occur at this time. The head of Zeus Ammon on the obverses of the remaining 3 gold tetralitron types are very similar in style to some contemporary silver coins with personal names. They were probably struck during the mid-4th century BC and used for commerce before being replaced by adequate gold coins. So these unusual denominations, there have been several discussions about what the coins represented, and particularly what their values were in relation to silver coins. So the gold to silver ratio for gold coins of Greek cities tended to decrease during the 4th century BC. So these gold coins may have been produced at these weights to reflect the gold to silver ratio at the time they were struck. So the first tetralitron struck at the end of the 5th century BC would have been equivalent to 3 Attic tetradrachms if Kyrene was using the gold to silver ratio that was being used around the same time at Syracuse for their gold coin. In the first half of the 4th century BC, the gold to silver ratio decreased 12 to 1, and this is also when Asiatic tetradrachms were introduced to Kyrene. At this point, the tetralitron would be equivalent to 3 Asiatic tetradrachms. In the last quarter after of the 4th century BC, the ratio dropped to 10 to 1. The tetralitra and dilitra had been replaced by Attic weight coins at this time, but the litra persisted and would have been equal to an Attic didrachm. These 4 tetralitron and 3 dilitron types are the only known gold coins of Kyrenaica with type 1c silphium plant. Surviving example of these gold tetralitra and dilitra are very rare, with a total of 10 and only a single recorded specimen for 6 of the 7 known types. The output might have been relatively small, as the first 3 coins shared 2 obverse and 2 reverse dies, while the latter 4 used only a single pair of dies for each type. Only 1 coin has the city ethnic, and another has a personal name associated with Kyrene. It is reasonable to assume that all are from the mint at Kyrene. The 3 previously unrecorded types allowed for a better understanding of the chronological order of the series. These are the abbreviations I'd use for the reference catalogs in this presentation. And here's the bibliography. Most of the coins used for this presentation, the sources are from these various sites. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. That was a really interesting presentation. A lot of beautiful coins. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or type them into the chat if you would prefer that way.
So Ryan, you did mention the coins, and one of the nice things is so many museums, including the ANS, are putting the images online. So when you put together a presentation like this, it's much easier to find images available, although some of these I had obtained in the course of preparing the article that was being done from the sources.
Yeah, thank goodness, because it's such a labor of love putting these slide decks together. I mean, I had a question about a couple of the varieties. One, just with the gazelle that was grazing on the silphium plant, was there any kind of particular significance of the gazelle to Kyrene, or was it more kind of just like an observation of the natural world?
Well, in part it was an observation because you do other animal are present, but earlier during the Archaic period, oftentimes the gazelle was represented on coins of Kyrene, whereas the bull would be represented on the coins of Barcae, and then later when coins were introduced at Euhesperides, oftentimes a dolphin was present. So these various animals were oftentimes associated with those particular cities.
Okay. Yeah. Uta, go ahead.
Yes, John, this was a fabulous talk. I have been long a huge fan, as well as my husband, who's listening, of the mint of Kyrene, and in fact, some of his coins were that he had. You might be, of course, aware that we've written an article challenging the concept of the gazelle, that in fact what the animal is that you see there is a jerboa. And some of the earlier little, and for those of you who don't know what a jerboa is, this is a sort of little mouse, let's call it, with long spring legs. And the determination whether this is a gazelle or it's a much smaller animal really has to do, and this is where my question is that we don't really know what this silphium plant really looks like, although there are some ideas now. If this is a gazelle, this is a gazelle standing on hind legs. I mean, this is an impressive plant, whereas what is now being thought of as related to silphium is a much, not a particularly tall plant. So how do you stand on this? As you undoubtedly know, much debate.
Well, of course, I had read your article, but I had used a gazelle because that's kind of the traditional representation. But I agree. I mean, perhaps they just aren't in proportion, but if that was a gazelle, it would either be a very large plant or a very small gazelle. And on the other hand, the jerboa is not much larger. It's certainly smaller than a rabbit. So it's standing up to the silphium plant, which would probably, I mean, obviously we don't know, but related Ferula species are usually, somewhere from a meter to a meter and a half in height. So this would be a small silphium plant.
So my husband, of course, who's listening, says, remember, there was the genet, which was the other possibility of it being
correct, right, which would be a larger,
yes, larger. But it's no, it is really amazing when you look at these different plants, and also, there is an amazing consistency to that silphium depiction over the centuries, isn't it? That you rightly, and it's really wonderful how you describe the different parts of this plant. It's so precise, and today we have to still guess what there is. But there has been a recent study by someone that thinks that they've discovered this in Turkey, and they're doing studies, and some of the assumed properties of this plant, which was like, for birth control and all sorts of aphrodisiac and so on, with these plants, with these studies that are underway at the moment, seems that there is actually some truth in this, perhaps.
Yes. So the article you mentioned is by a pharmacist named Minsky in Turkey, and the plant is Ferula drudiana. Has been known in Turkey for a long time. The differences are Ferula drudiani has parallel leaves, whereas the silphium was supposed to have alternating leaves. And also the seed is more oval rather than being heart-shaped, although there is some views that the seed, because it's actually two seeds split out of one pod, that the heart shape may actually be a representation of the two seeds as they're starting to split. So I'm not certain. Obviously, the best information would be if a botanical archaeologist would find, and there is one of the botanical archaeologists at the British Museum has suggested that perhaps in an underwater find, they'll sometimes find some residual plant material in the in the bottom of an amphora in a shipwreck, and then be able to identify the genetic material. But that's just speculation to this point.
We live in hope, right?
Because there is always an effort with many of the ancient sources to point out that Cyrenaic silphium was different from other known types of silphium that were used mainly as food additives. So, of course, they're trying to emphasize the medicinal properties of the Kyrenic silphium as being superior to other ferula species. So,
Yeah, and I guess kind of tangential, but do you know from the sources if it's more kind of the seeds that were said to have the curative properties, if it's more the vegetation of the plant, or?
Ryan, there's not much mention of the seeds being used, except for the statement that the plant would not propagate anywhere else, and that's also led to speculation that it may actually have been a sterile hybrid. Even though seeds were produced, they wouldn't produce plants other place. But again, that's speculation. The stalk and leaves were oftentimes used as a food supplement, but the juice from the stem and also from the root would be squeezed, and that would be used to make various compounds, mostly for medicinal uses. But it also was used as a sauce for flavoring foods, particularly meats.
Very interesting.
There was an effort, and sometimes the root would be exposed, and just a small mix would be made in the silphium root to drain some of the sap out to make the juices without killing the plant. Which, if you crush the entire root to obtain it, then of course the plant wouldn't be able to regenerate, and that the plants were annual, so that they would tend to propagate again the next year.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I guess not. Just a couple more comments that just saying thank you for such a great presentation, John. And just, yeah, thank you from me, and I'm sure everyone else, for being here and sharing the time. As, like I said, very fascinating, a lot of really beautiful coins, especially love that front facing one. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.